Pastor Daniel, along with Michael and his wife, explores the biblical concept of submission in marriage, clarifying its distinction from cooperation and highlighting how true submission fosters harmony and unexpected blessings. In a world where gender roles and equality are widely debated, the biblical concept of submission in marriage often sparks controversy. Many misunderstand it, equating it with oppression, while others see it as a divine principle for harmony in the home. In this discussion, Pastor Daniel, along with Michael and his wife, engage in a heartfelt conversation about the distinction between submission and cooperation, uncovering how true biblical submission, when embraced, can transform a marriage and lead to unexpected blessings.
Pastor Grace and I have been having some discussions about marriage roles, and we don't seem to agree on what submission truly means.
Yes, Pastor. I always cooperate with Michael, but he insists that submission is something deeper. Honestly, in today's world, where women and men are considered equal, isn't submission outdated?
That's a great question, Grace. But let's start with a simple analogy. Every machine that is manufactured comes with a manual from the maker, right?
Yes, that's true. Without following the manual, the machine won't function properly.
But Pastor, isn't cooperation enough? I cooperate with Michael when we agree on something.
Exactly. Marriage is no different. It is God's creation, and He gave us a manual, the Bible. Husbands are commanded to love their wives, and wives are instructed to submit to their husbands. This is God's divine order, and when followed, marriage becomes a sweet union. Cooperation is good, but it's not the same as submission. Cooperation happens when both partners naturally agree on something. Submission, on the other hand, is when a wife chooses to honor and follow her husband's leadership, even when she may not fully agree, out of trust in God's divine order.
That makes sense. Just like in any organization, there has to be a leader for order to be maintained.
Exactly. Submission doesn't mean slavery or inferiority. Think about a workplace. When you obey your boss, does it mean you are a slave?
No, it just means I respect the authority in place.
Right. Marriage is structured the same way. A ship cannot have two captains or it will sink. A wife submitting to her husband as the head does not mean she loses her voice or value. Instead, it strengthens the marriage.
But what if the husband is difficult or unreasonable?
Submission is not about agreeing to sin or tolerating abuse. It is about yielding in areas that align with God's will. Let me share a story. There was a woman who struggled with her husband's stubbornness. She kept asking me to pray for him to change. Instead, I advised her to do something different. I told her, when he comes home, serve his food, call him your head, and kneel as he washes his hands.
That must have been difficult for her.
It was. She protested at first, saying, "We are both professors, we are equals," but she eventually obeyed. At first, her husband was shocked and thought she had poisoned the food. But when she explained, something in him changed. He became softer, followed her to church, and gave his life to Christ. Their marriage flourished afterward.
Wow, so submission can actually transform a marriage?
Yes, when husbands love sacrificially and wives submit willingly, the marriage thrives. The divine manual works if we follow it.
Thank you, Pastor. I now understand that my role is to love Grace as Christ loves the church, and her role is to submit in a way that brings harmony, not oppression.
I see now that submission is a godly principle, not a cultural limitation. I'll trust God's design and follow His manual.
That's the spirit. When we follow God's blueprint, marriage becomes a true blessing.
Pastor, why is it that most celebrities don't get married?
I'm afraid it's because many of them realize they may struggle with submission due to their money, power, and influence. That's why I always talk about one actress called Mercy Johnson. She is an exception. Despite her success, she remains submissive to her husband, still cooks for him, and honors her role as a wife. Others should emulate her example because true submission brings harmony, not oppression, in marriage.
Thank you, Pastor, for this wisdom. Your teachings are opening our eyes to God's perfect design for marriage.